3 times a day, what the rancher did next changed history. The scream came first this time, cutting through the frozen California morning like a blade through silk. Thomas Grant dropped his axe, the wood forgotten as he ran toward the sound. What he found at his property line would haunt him forever. She lay crumpled in the snow, her dress torn and stained crimson against the white. Steam rose from her wounds in the bitter cold. The woman couldn't have been more than 23, her face swollen and bruised beyond recognition. Her lips moved, forming words that made no sound. Thomas was 51, a widower who'd come to California seeking solitude after losing everything back east. His weathered hands shook as he knelt beside her. The snow around her was trampled, marked with boot prints heading back toward the settlement of Nueva Vista. He knew those boots. Every rancher in the territory knew the heavy tread of the Caldwell brothers, men who ruled this valley with fists and fear, men who bought and sold people like cattle, even here in California where such things were supposed to be ending. The woman's eyes flickered open, gray as winter storms. She grabbed his wrist with surprising strength, her frozen fingers digging into his skin. One word escaped her cracked lips. Help. Thomas looked back at his cabin, then at the road leading to town. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to pretend he'd seen nothing. The Caldwells didn't forgive interference. But something in those gray eyes changed everything. He lifted her carefully, feeling how light she was, how close to death. As he carried her toward his home, he didn't notice the rider watching from the distant hills, or the way that rider turned his horse toward town. By nightfall, everyone would know what Thomas had done. And by midnight, they'd come for them both. Thomas kicked open his cabin door, laying her on his only bed near the fireplace. The frost had gotten into her wounds. He'd seen frostbite before, knew what it could do. 3 times a day, he told himself. That's how often he'd need to tend to her, if she had any chance at all. He heated water in his largest pot, hands moving with purpose he hadn't felt in years. His wife Martha had been a healer, had taught him things before the fever took her. Clean the wounds first, she'd always said, then warm the body slowly. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness as he worked. Each time he touched her injuries, she flinched but didn't cry out. Whatever strength she had left, she was using to stay silent. Thomas understood. In Nueva Vista, women who cried were women who got hurt worse. By midday, he'd cleaned her wounds twice, wrapped her in every blanket he owned, and managed to get warm broth past her lips. Her shivers had stopped, which worried him more than if they'd continued. Now, if you're listening to this story and wondering what happens next, I need you to hit that like button, share this with someone who loves a good tale, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes after. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I love knowing where my stories travel, because what Thomas discovered about this woman's identity would shake California to its foundations. The afternoon sun was fading when she finally spoke. Her voice was hoarse, broken, but clear enough. My name is Rebecca. They'll kill you for helping me. Thomas stirred the fire, not looking at her. I know. She tried to sit up, gasping with pain. Then why? He thought about his wife, about the promises he'd made to her before she died. Promises about being the kind of man who doesn't look away. Because somebody should have helped you before it got this far. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, the first emotion beyond fear that he'd seen. Outside, the winter wind picked up, howling around the cabin like wolves circling prey. Somewhere in that wind, Thomas swore he heard hoofbeats. 3 horses, maybe 4, riding hard. They were coming faster than he'd expected. Through the window, Thomas watched them approach. 4 riders, dark shapes against the snow. He recognized the lead horse immediately. Marcus Caldwell, the eldest brother, rode a black stallion that was legend in these parts. Rebecca struggled to rise. I need to hide. Too late for hiding. Thomas pulled his rifle from above the door. Time for standing. You don't understand. Rebecca's voice cracked with urgency. I'm not just some runaway they beat for sport. I'm Marcus Caldwell's legal wife. The words hit Thomas like a winter gale. He turned to stare at her. Wife? Bought me from a debtor in San Francisco 3 years ago. Paid $200 and a horse. She laughed bitterly. I was his property. When I tried to run last week, he made an example of me. Left me to freeze as a lesson to his other women. Other women. Thomas felt sick. Rebecca continued. words tumbling faster now. But I know things. I kept records of every crime, every illegal transaction, every murder they've committed. I hid them before I ran. If those records reached the territorial judge, the Caldwells would hang. Thomas finished, understanding flooding through him. That's why they're not sending hired guns. They're coming themselves. The hoofbeats stopped outside. Thomas heard boots crunching in snow, the jingle of spurs, the click of rifle hammers being drawn back. Marcus Caldwell's voice boomed through the door. "Thomas Grant, send out my property, and maybe I'll let you live." Thomas looked at Rebecca, at this woman who'd survived 3 years of hell and still had the courage to fight. He thought about Martha, about what she would have wanted him to do. He called back, "There's no property here, just a free woman under my protection." The silence that followed was more terrifying than any threat. Then Marcus said softly, "Then you've chosen to die. We'll burn you both out." Thomas watched through the window as 2 men circled toward the back of the cabin, torches already lit. The attack was beginning, and he had exactly 3 minutes to figure out how they'd both survive the night. Fire. The oldest weapon, the cruelest killer. Thomas watched the Caldwell men touch their torches to the dry wood of his storage shed. Flames leaped up, hungry and bright, turning night into hellish day. Rebecca tried to stand, fell back with a cry. "We're trapped!" Thomas was already moving. He grabbed his hunting bag, stuffed it with ammunition and dried meat. Then something else, something he'd hoped never to use again. A leather pouch, hidden under a floorboard, containing powder charges he'd prepared years ago for clearing stumps. Martha had hated when he made them. Dangerous, she'd called them. Unpredictable. Now they might be the only thing keeping Rebecca alive. The front door shuddered under a violent kick. Marcus's voice, cold and certain. "Final chance, Grant. Send her out." Thomas looked at Rebecca. "Can you ride?" "Barely, but I'll manage." He handed her his hunting knife. "If I fall, you run for the mission at San Rafael. Father Domingo will hide you." The door splinked. Another kick, this one cracking the wood. Thomas lit a thin fuse, counted to 3, then threw the first powder charge through the window. The explosion wasn't large, but in the confined space between cabin and shed, it was devastating. Men screamed. A horse bolted. The flames from the burning shed scattered, creating shadows and confusion. Now, Thomas pulled Rebecca through the back door, into the winter darkness. His horse was already saddled, kept ready for exactly this kind of emergency. They mounted together, Rebecca clutching his waist. Thomas spurred the horse hard, and they exploded from behind the cabin just as the Caldwells realized what was happening. Gunfire erupted. A bullet whined past Thomas's ear. Another struck the saddle horn, sending splinters flying. They raced into the darkness with 4 vengeful riders behind them. And Thomas knew exactly where he was leading them, to a place where even the Caldwells feared to follow. But could they reach it before the bullets found their mark? The horse's breath came in frozen clouds as they plunged down the narrow trail. Behind them, hoofbeats echoed off canyon walls. Thomas knew this path by moonlight, had ridden it 100 times. The Caldwells didn't. That was his only advantage. Rebecca's grip weakened around his waist. "Hold on," he urged, "just a little further." The canyon opened below them, a vast darkness split by a frozen creek. This was sacred ground, land the local tribes had warned settlers never to cross at night. Stories spoke of spirits, of men who entered and never returned. Thomas didn't believe in spirits, but he believed in fear, and fear made men predictable. He reined the horse to a stop at the canyon's edge. Behind them, the Caldwells burst from the tree line, 4 dark shapes against the snow. They slowed when they saw where their quarry had stopped. Marcus called out, "You're cornered, Grant. Nowhere left to run." Thomas helped Rebecca down, positioned her behind a boulder. Then he did something unexpected. He stepped into full view, rifle raised. "You want her? Come and take her." The Caldwells exchanged glances. It was too easy, too obvious. Marcus suspected a trap. He was right. Thomas had spent the last 3 years mapping this canyon, discovering its secrets, including the unstable overhang directly above where the Caldwells now sat on their horses. Before you go further into this story, do me a favor. Smash that like button, share this tale, and subscribe for more. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Your support means everything. Now, back to that canyon. Thomas aimed his rifle carefully, not at the men, but at the snow-laden rocks above them. He fired once. The sound echoed like thunder. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world moved. The overhang collapsed, tons of snow and rock cascading down. Horses screamed, men shouted. The avalanche swallowed them all in a white, roaring wave. When silence returned, Thomas waited, listening. Slowly, figures emerged from the snow, coughing and disoriented. But only 3 figures. One Caldwell was missing, and the survivors looked ready to kill. Marcus Caldwell emerged from the snowdrift like a demon from hell, ice clinging to his beard, murder blazing in his eyes. His youngest brother lay buried beneath the snow. "You'll die screaming for that, Grant." But Thomas wasn't watching Marcus. He was watching Rebecca, who had risen from behind the boulder, standing tall despite her wounds. Her voice rang out clear and strong. "Tell them, Marcus. Tell them why you really want me dead." Marcus's face changed. "Shut your mouth. Tell them about the judge in San Francisco, about how you poisoned him to steal his land grants." Rebecca stepped forward. "Tell them about the mission families you burned out, the native villages you raided." Thomas understood then. This wasn't about a runaway wife. This was about silence. "She has no proof," Marcus snarled. Rebecca smiled, cold and certain. "I have your ledgers, Marcus. Every transaction, every murder, recorded in your own hand, hidden where you'll never find them without me." The remaining Caldwell brothers shifted nervously. If evidence existed— "Where?" Marcus demanded. "Get me to the territorial judge alive and I'll tell him. Otherwise, those ledgers will surface after my death, and you'll hang anyway." The standoff stretched. Thomas could see Marcus calculating. Finally, the eldest Caldwell spoke. "Then I'll take you to the judge myself. We'll let him decide who's telling the truth." Thomas stepped between them. "She goes nowhere with you." Marcus laughed. "You think you can stop all 3 of us? I think I'm the only one here who knows how to get out of this canyon alive. In the dark, in winter. You try to take her by force, we'll all die together." He paused. "Or we all ride to San Rafael together, neutral ground, Father Domingo as witness. Let Rebecca speak her truth." The Caldwell brothers conferred in whispers. Thomas held his breath. Finally, Marcus nodded. "Dawn, we ride together. But if she's lying, Grant, I'll gut you both." Thomas helped Rebecca back onto his horse. Her whisper was urgent. "I wasn't lying about the ledgers, but I was lying about where they are." She pressed something small and hard into his hand, a key. "They're in your cabin, Thomas, hidden in your wife's old medicine chest. I broke in 3 weeks ago. It was the only place I knew he'd never search." Thomas's cabin, which was currently burning to ash. Their only evidence was turning to smoke, and dawn was only 5 hours away. Thomas's mind raced faster than his galloping horse. The cabin. Everything was in the cabin. If those ledgers burned, Rebecca would have no proof. The Caldwells would kill them both and call it justice. They had to reach the cabin before the fire consumed everything. As they navigated out of the canyon, Thomas leaned close to Rebecca. How long will those ledgers survive fire? The medicine chest was iron-bound oak. She coughed weakly. If the flames haven't reached it yet, maybe an hour, maybe less. An hour. The cabin was 40 minutes away at killing pace, but with Rebecca injured and the Caldwells watching every move, how could he search the ruins without revealing what he was looking for? Marcus rode alongside them, suspicious eyes never leaving Thomas's face. "Mighty quiet, Grant. Planning something?" "Just thinking about how cold it is." Thomas kept his voice steady. "We'll see morning first." Marcus gestured to his brothers. "One of you ride ahead to the cabin. Make sure nothing survives that fire." Thomas's heart sank. If they found the medicine chest, discovered the ledgers— Rebecca sensed his panic. She spoke loudly. "I need water and rest. My wounds are bleeding again." She wasn't lying. Fresh blood stained her dress. Marcus swore but called for a halt near a frozen stream. Under pretense of cleaning her wounds, she whispered urgently, "The middle brother Daniel, I have something on him. Something Marcus doesn't know." "What?" "He's been stealing from the family accounts, planning to run to Mexico." Rebecca's eyes were sharp despite her pain. Tell him about the ledgers. Tell him I'll keep his secret if he helps us." Thomas studied Daniel Caldwell. The man stood apart from his brothers, nervous, jumpy, a man with secrets. It was a desperate gamble, but desperate was all they had. Thomas approached Daniel, spoke low. "I know about Guadalajara, about the money you've been hiding." Daniel's face went white. "I don't know what. Rebecca knows everything." Thomas cut him off. "She'll stay silent if you help us reach San Rafael alive. Otherwise, Marcus learns the truth tonight." Daniel's hand drifted to his gun. "Or I could kill you both." Thomas smiled grimly. "The money's in Rebecca's ledgers, too. Kill us, and Marcus finds everything. Help us, and you ride away rich and free." Daniel looked at Rebecca, at Marcus, at the dark road ahead. Finally, he nodded. "What do you need?" They reached the cabin as false dawn painted the sky grey. What remained was smoking timber and ash, the smell of destruction hanging in the frozen air. Marcus dismounted with a satisfied smile. "Nothing left now. Just your word against mine, Rebecca." Thomas walked through the ruins, heart pounding. Where had Martha kept her medicine chest? Near the fireplace, which meant it was under 3 feet of collapsed roof timber. He began moving charred wood, trying to look aimless, searching. Marcus watched carefully. "Looking for something, Grant?" "Just seeing what can be salvaged." "Nothing." Marcus's voice was cold. "Nothing survives that heat." But Thomas's hand touched something solid, metal, still too hot to lift, but definitely there. The medicine chest. He forced himself to move past it, to keep searching randomly. Rebecca understood. She stumbled, crying out, drawing Marcus's attention. "I need to sit, please." While Marcus and his brothers helped Rebecca to a wall, Daniel moved closer to Thomas, whispered, "Is it there?" Thomas nodded fractionally. "Under the beam to my left, too hot yet." Daniel positioned himself between Thomas and his brothers. Thomas worked frantically, using wood to lever the chest free. It was scorched black but intact. He pried it open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were 3 leather ledgers, untouched by flame. Thomas's hands shook as he pulled them out. 7 years of evidence, every crime the Caldwells had committed, recorded in Marcus's own handwriting. Rebecca hadn't been exaggerating. He tucked the ledgers inside his coat, just as Marcus turned. "What's that?" Thomas held up a scorched tin cup. "Just this, all that's left." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Show me your coat." Thomas's blood ran cold. If Marcus searched him now... Daniel stepped forward quickly. "Brother, we need to move. Sun's coming up. If we don't reach San Rafael by mid-morning, Father Domingo might not be there." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. But Grant, you ride in front where I can see you." They mounted up, Thomas aware of the weight against his chest. Every step brought them closer to San Rafael, to safety, to justice. But it also brought them closer to the moment when Marcus would realize he'd been deceived. They had perhaps 2 hours left to live, unless Father Domingo proved to be more than just a priest. San Rafael Mission rose from the winter landscape like a promise of sanctuary, its white walls gleaming in morning sun. But as they approached, Thomas saw armed men on the walls, not priests, soldiers. Marcus saw them too, smiled. "Changed your mind about neutral ground, Grant? Brought the army?" Thomas was as surprised as anyone. "I don't know what this is." A man in captain's uniform rode out to meet them, Marcus Caldwell. "You're under arrest for the murder of Judge Harrison in San Francisco." Marcus's face went pale. "That's a lie. I had nothing. We have a witness." The captain gestured, and another rider emerged from behind the mission walls. Thomas's breath caught. It was Father Domingo, but he wasn't alone. Beside him rode a young woman in travel-stained clothes, her face set with determination. Rebecca saw her and gasped. Sarah. The newcomer rode forward. "Hello, Marcus. Remember me? Your second wife? The one you left for dead in Monterey?" Marcus's composure cracked. "How did you find each other?" Sarah's smile was razor-sharp. "Rebecca and I have been corresponding for months. When she went missing, I knew she was making her move. So I went to the authorities with my own evidence. She held up papers. My ledgers, my records, everything you did to me and dozens of other women. The captain spoke again. When we received Sarah's testimony, we sent riders throughout California. Your brothers are also wanted for crimes in 3 territories. The 2 remaining Caldwell brothers went for their guns. Daniel was faster. He shot his own siblings, not to kill but to disarm. When they fell, cursing, he turned to the captain. I'll testify against them all, in exchange for clemency. Marcus lunged at Daniel, murder in his eyes. Traitor! Thomas stepped between them, rifle ready. It's over, Marcus. The soldiers surrounded them. As Marcus was dragged away in chains, he screamed threats and curses. But his words were just wind now, empty and powerless. Rebecca slid from the horse into Sarah's arms. Both women wept, their nightmare finally ending. Father Domingo approached Thomas. You kept her alive. Not many men would have risked so much. Thomas watched the soldiers lead the Caldwell brothers away. I just gave her time to save herself. The priest smiled. Sometimes that's all salvation requires. Time and kindness. That night at the mission they celebrated, but Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't finished yet. And he was right, because Rebecca had one more revelation that would change everything. After the celebration wound down, Rebecca found Thomas sitting alone in the mission garden. The moonlight made her scars look like silver rivers. There's something you need to know. She sat beside him. Thomas waited. He'd learned that Rebecca spoke when ready. The ledgers you risked your life for. They're valuable, yes, but they're not the most important thing I took from Marcus. She pulled out a small leather pouch, opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed with age. A land grant, signed by the Spanish governor, dating back 20 years. Thomas studied it. I don't understand. This mission. Rebecca's voice was soft. This land, all of San Rafael Valley. It doesn't belong to the Caldwells. It belongs to the native people who've lived here for centuries. She pointed to the signature. Marcus's father stole this grant from a tribal elder he murdered. He forged documents claiming the land was legally purchased. 3 families built their fortunes on stolen ground. Thomas looked around the peaceful mission garden. If this became public, everything changes. Rebecca nodded. The Caldwells lose everything, but so do a dozen other families who bought property in good faith. Innocent people who built homes here. What will you do with it? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. I'm going to give it to Father Domingo. Let him decide. He knows this community, knows who deserves justice and who deserves mercy. Thomas smiled. You could have kept it, sold it for enough money to start over anywhere. I thought about it, Rebecca admitted, but I realized something while I was bleeding in that snow. Revenge and justice aren't the same thing. She stood, offered him her hand. Thank you, Thomas Grant, for not riding past me, for not looking away. He took her hand. What will you do now? Sarah and I are heading to San Francisco. We're starting a home for women like us. Women who need time to heal. And before we move forward with this story, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, subscribe to this channel, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. These stories matter, and you make them possible. Now back to that garden. Thomas released her hand. You'll need help. Building costs money. Rebecca pulled out another paper. The Caldwell accounts. There's $18,000 in San Francisco banks. Blood money, but maybe it can do some good. Thomas laughed. You really did think of everything. No. Rebecca's smile was sad. Martha thought of everything. Your wife. Her medicine chest saved my life twice. Once by hiding evidence, once by showing me what love looks like. 3 weeks later, Thomas stood in the ruins of his cabin, deciding what to rebuild. Winter had been brutal, but spring was coming. He could feel it in the air, see it in the first green shoots. Father Domingo found him there, examining foundation stones. The priest carried a leather satchel. The land grant, he explained. Rebecca gave it to me, as promised. And? Thomas straightened. What did you decide? Father Domingo opened the satchel, showed him the paper. Not what I decided. What the tribal elders decided. They want to share the land, not reclaim it. Create a community where everyone has a place. Thomas felt something shift inside him. Forgiveness, when revenge was possible, that takes courage or wisdom. The priest smiled. They remember their own history. Remember times when their people took land from others. The cycle has to break somewhere. He pulled out another document. They want you to be the first. Thomas Grant, you're being offered 50 acres at the canyon's edge to build your ranch. Thomas looked at the paper, at the opportunity for a fresh start. Why me? Because you didn't look away. Because when everyone else was concerned with ownership and profit, you were concerned with saving a life. The priest left him alone. Thomas walked to where his cabin had stood, where he'd carried Rebecca through the door that frozen morning. He thought about the 3 times a day he'd tended her wounds, about how something so simple had changed everything. That afternoon, he found Rebecca at the edge of the property, planting something. She looked healthier now, stronger, though the scars would never fully fade. "What are you planting?" he asked. "Apple trees." She smiled up at him. "One for every woman we've helped so far. 17 trees. By next winter, they'll have roots deep enough to survive the cold." Thomas knelt beside her, helped pack earth around the slender trunk. Roots deep enough to survive. That's all any of us need. Rebecca handed him a sapling. "This one's for you, for the man who gave me time to heal." As they worked together in the warming soil, Thomas realized something. He'd spent 3 years mourning his wife, hiding from life. But Martha wouldn't have wanted that. She'd have wanted exactly this. Purpose, connection, a reason to keep going. The apple tree took root easily, its branches reaching toward the California sun. And somewhere in that moment, between winter and spring, between death and rebirth, Thomas Grant decided to stop merely surviving. He decided to live. 5 years passed like water over stones, smooth and inevitable. The ranch grew, not large but sufficient. The apple trees bore fruit. Women came seeking refuge, stayed to heal, then moved on to their own futures. Thomas kept his routine. 3 times a day, every day. Morning, he checked the property. Noon, he shared meals with whoever needed company. Evening, he sat on his porch, watching the sun paint the canyon gold. Rebecca visited often, bringing news from San Francisco. The home she and Sarah built was thriving. 30 women now, maybe more. They were opening a second house, then a third. "You started something," Thomas told her one evening. "Changed more than just your own life." "We started something," Rebecca corrected. "You could have ridden past. Most men would have." He thought about that moment, about the choice that changed everything. "What made you fight so hard?" he asked. Rebecca was quiet, watching the canyon shadows lengthen. "Because someone once told me that broken things still shine if you hold them up to the light." She smiled at him. "I decided to believe it." Father Domingo came by that evening, bringing communion wine and news. The territorial court had officially recognized the shared land agreement. Native families and settlers alike could claim homesteads, justice and mercy together. The priest raised his glass. That's rare. They drank to new beginnings, to choices that mattered, to the simple act of not looking away. As the stars came out, Thomas thought about history, about how it's written, not by emperors or generals usually, but by ordinary people making small choices. Helping a stranger, telling the truth, 3 times a day, such a simple rhythm. But it had saved a life, exposed corruption, and helped dozens of women find freedom. Not through grand gestures, just through consistent, quiet kindness. Rebecca stood to leave, paused at the door. "What will you do now, Thomas?" He looked around his simple home, at the apple trees swaying in the evening breeze. "This," he said simply. "Keep doing this. Because it turns out 3 times a day is exactly enough to change the world." Before you go, one last thing. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Share it. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what small act of kindness you might do tomorrow. Because history isn't just what happened. It's what we choose to do next.